Ladies and gentlemen of Moonshine, I sincerely welcome you to the Cut Code channel. We're kicking off a new guide on Moonshine version 3.0, the third version. Right in front of us, we have the documentation, specifically the Getting Started section we need. In this guide, we'll go step by step, exploring Moonshine together. If we recall the previous guide for version 2, I believe I made a small mistake there. I experimented a lot, got a bit too creative, and showed you a somewhat unconventional approach when we built an entire website using Moonshine, including the client side with Blade components. Yes, it was a great way to showcase Moonshine's capabilities, but its primary purpose is still personal dashboards and admin panels in all their variations. The previous guide ended up confusing some people, making them think they always had to follow that approach. That Moonshine is meant for full site development, that UI components must be used in that way, and so on. This led to a lot of questions. This time, we'll focus on how to work with Moonshine properly, what's happening under the hood and why things work the way they do. My goal is not just to make you Moonshine users, but true professionals who understand the system and can fully leverage its power. Alright, friends, let's dive into the first steps. So, let's start with the requirements. Naturally, we need PHP, and as we can see, the minimum version required is 8.2. Laravel, of course, is essential as well, starting from version 10.48. The need for Composer is obvious from the installation command at first glance. What do I have set up already? I've installed a fresh Laravel, just now, completely clean. Moonshine isn't installed yet. I've also launched a web server, and we can see the default Laravel welcome page. I'm running PHP 8.4 and Laravel 11.39. Alright, let's copy the Moonshine installation command, switch to our project, open the console, and execute it. At the time of this recording, we saw that version 3.3.7 was installed. Alright, what's next? Naturally, we refer to the documentation. All we need to do now is complete the installation. We'll go through each step in detail, but before that, let's try a quick installation. I think this will be useful for you later on. You can copy this command and add the Q option, like this. After this, Moonshine won't prompt you for anything, everything will be set to default. Migrations will be executed, the layout and dashboard will be created, the notifications driver will be selected, and everything else will be configured automatically. Basically, it's a default setup that you'll likely use in 99% of projects. The only thing left to do is create an admin user. Let's do that. We'll specify admin, use admin@cutcode.dev as the email, keep the name the same as admin@cutcode.dev, and set a password. Let's make it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. That took exactly 2 seconds, and we're all set. Now, let's go to the admin panel, enter admin, and we land on the login page. Next, we'll log in with the user we just created, admin@cutcode.dev and password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, let's save that. And here we are in the admin panel, ready to go, and it's not empty. We have a profile section where we can quickly save changes, update the password, modify basic details, or choose an avatar. We also already have a few sections and resources in place. They're system generated. There's an administrators section, which currently only contains us, and a roles section. As you can see, it only takes a few seconds to set up a Moonshine admin panel and start working with it. In future guides, I'll show you additional tools that allow you to install Moonshine in an existing project and generate a fully functional admin panel with all resources based on your database schema using just one command. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've now quickly installed Moonshine. Now, let's run the installation again, but this time, we'll go through everything in detail, breaking down exactly what's happening and what choices need to be made. That's why we're here, to learn how to use the Moonshine admin panel. Alright. The first question is whether or not to enable authentication. If you choose no, then when accessing the admin panel at /admin, you won't see a login form, you'll be taken straight inside. The panel will be publicly accessible. This might be useful if you want to implement authentication entirely on your own, use a service like Auth0, set up SSO, or if your project isn't actually an admin panel but something else. However, in most cases, you'll likely keep authentication enabled and choose yes here. Moving on, should we use system migrations? By default, Moonshine includes migrations that create separate tables for admin panel users and roles, just 2 tables. In most cases, you'll select yes. But if you'd rather use your existing users table for the admin panel or create a custom model and table for administrators, in that case, you select No and handle everything yourself. Moonshine gives you this flexibility. At the configuration level, you can set everything up as needed. But that's not our case right now. We're following the default path, so we select Yes. Moving on, enable notifications. Moonshine includes a built-in notification system. Here, if we had any notifications, we'd see a bell icon where they would appear. For example, when an import or export happens, or for any custom events you add, a fully functional notification system. If you don't need it, you can disable it or turn it off and implement your own. Moonshine offers flexibility here too. Everything is built on abstractions, so you can swap implementations. Let's go with the default Yes. Next question. As you may know from Laravel's documentation, notifications support multiple drivers: database, SMS, broadcasts, or custom implementations. By default, Moonshine comes with a database driver. You can enable it or choose No and implement your own. For example, in the Moonshine ecosystem, there's a package called Rush that integrates WebSockets. It includes its own broadcast-based notification driver. In our case, let's stick with Yes. Now, the next question depends on your preference, your client's preference, or the project's goals. Which default theme do you want to use? Moonshine comes with two built-in themes. One is compact, like this. And the other is the original, full version, which looks like this. It's more complex, with more colors. By the way, colors, like everything else in Moonshine, can be customized, but visually, these themes are quite different. There's also a third theme option. It's an extension of the compact version that simply adds rounded corners. As you can see, by default, everything is squared off, but you can switch to a border radius style. Alright, let's go back. We've seen the compact theme, so this time, let's select No to install the default theme and check it out. Next, user creation. We've already created a user, so if we choose Yes, we'll see the form for email, name, and password again. Since we already have a super user, we don't need another one. So in this case, we'll choose No. But that's only because we've already completed the installation. If you're going step by step, you'd select Yes and create a user. Alright, No. And now for the final step. You can skip it, but it's quite important for the project's growth. When you select Yes, you'll see a link to the Moonshine GitHub repository, where we ask for a small favor: just give the project a star. We appreciate your support, and if you do, I thank you in advance and shake your hand. And that's it, we've completed the installation, answered all the questions, and also went through the quick setup. Our Moonshine admin panel is now installed. We've just seen the compact theme, and here's the default theme. It looks much nicer, in my opinion. Which one you choose, or how you customize it, is up to you. Colors, logos, everything can be changed to suit your needs. If at any point you decide to switch themes, don't worry, you don't have to rerun the installation. Just go to the app Moonshine directory, navigate to the Layouts folder, where the default layout is stored, and change the app layout to compact layout, for example. That's our compact theme. Then, all you need to do is go back to the browser, refresh the page, and you'll see the compact theme applied. Switching between themes in Moonshine is that simple. The topic of templates is actually quite interesting, and we'll cover it in detail in the next lesson. Today, I also want to walk through the configuration process, since that's the next step in the documentation, and quickly add a new resource. In the upcoming lessons, we'll go through everything step by step, configuring, setting up, and working with Moonshine. The menu structure isn't random, it's designed to guide you through Moonshine systematically. Even now, we've followed the proper sequence: first, installation, then configuration, then visual customization, and only after that, developing resources. Alright, let's move on to configuration. Moonshine offers two approaches. You can go the standard route using the config file, where everything is returned as an array. Nothing surprising here. In the config directory, there's a Moonshine PHP file where you can customize everything. You can set the default title for the admin panel, choose which logo to display in the full or collapsed sidebar, and adjust settings like migrations, notifications, and database notifications. Everything we configured during installation can be changed at any time via the config file. You can also configure the domain and prefix. For example, if you don't want to use admin and prefer panel instead, you can change it here. Or, if you're building a full-fledged project like a CRM on Moonshine, where Moonshine is the core of your project with no additional path levels, you can leave this field empty and Moonshine will be available directly from the root. The same applies to the page and resource prefixes. If you look at the default URL structure in Moonshine, you'll see that standard pages use the page prefix, while resources use the resource prefix. You can customize this to fit your needs, or even remove the resource prefix entirely. In that case, when you navigate the admin panel, resource URLs will be shorter and cleaner. This is entirely up to you. The next parameter is home route, which by default is set to Moonshine index. This is the index page with the dashboard. However, you can change it to another route or a specific URL, which we'll discuss later. Now, what is not found exception? That's a 404 error. If you try to access a non-existent page in Moonshine, you'll see a custom page not found screen. This config option allows you to override that exception. You can modify the render function and replace the 404 page with your own design, as well as customize other error pages. Next, we have the middleware section. I assume that if you're working with Moonshine, you already have a solid foundation in programming, have worked with Laravel, and are familiar with its documentation. You should know what middleware is and how it works in Laravel. Moonshine provides a list of middleware that are used inside the admin panel. You can modify, add, or replace them as needed. The only notable one is in the auth middleware section. This additional middleware locks down the admin panel, ensuring that only the login page remains accessible, so no one can enter the admin panel without authentication. Of course, you can override this middleware to add extra conditions, such as checking if a user has the correct role or any other custom logic. However, if authentication was disabled during installation or turned off in the config file, then this middleware won't be applied at all. Now, I'm skipping some advanced settings for now, as they might seem overwhelming at this stage. Instead, let's focus on the simpler things. We've already seen the main theme selection, compact or default, and this default theme is defined in the config file under Moonshine layout. However, Moonshine is built around pages, and you can have as many pages as you need. Each page can have its own layout. If no layout is specified, like here in the dashboard, it will fall back to the default one from the config. But if you explicitly define a layout property for a page, that page will use its own template, while others will continue using the default layout. Now, let's move on to the next section, forms. By default, Moonshine allows you to override frequently used forms, such as the login form. Here it is, the login form we saw earlier when logging in. It's not the entire page, just the form itself. You can replace it with your own version, just like you can with resource filter forms or any other page. The dashboard layout is already published, but you can also override the profile page, the full login page, not just the form, or even the 404 error page. That way, you're not changing the exception itself, just the visual appearance of the error page. Now, you might be wondering, how do I modify these forms and pages? Do I have to dig into the core files, copy them, and move them to my project? And as a Moonshine beginner, where do these files even go? No worries, you can do this much more easily using the command php artisan moonshine publish. This command lets you choose what to publish, forms, pages, or both. Moonshine uses Laravel prompts, so you can select multiple options using the spacebar. After selecting what you need, press enter to confirm. Let's go ahead and publish everything, forms and pages. We'll include the login form, filters form, and all available pages. We're doing this now for learning purposes, but in 99% of cases, you probably won't need to do this manually. Once published, you'll notice a change in the namespace. All the pages and forms are now located in the app Moonshine directory. Let's open this directory, and we'll see that everything is indeed there, Moonshine, forms, and our selected forms like the filter and login forms, along with the chosen pages. Now, let's check out the login form. As you can see, it simply returns a form with a set of fields. You can modify this however you like. Add a registration button, social login options, two-factor authentication, PIN code login, SMS-based login, anything you need. Registration, password recovery, you have Moonshine's UI components at your disposal, allowing you to design whatever you need at that level. Now, let's go back to the config file and check out a few more sections. One important section is localizations. This is where you set Moonshine's default language. By default, Moonshine only includes English. Since Moonshine is used internationally, we've chosen English as the default language. If you need to add another language, you can go to the Moonshine website, navigate to the Plugins section, and find Localizations. Here, you can search for the language you need. The list is constantly growing, and you can easily generate your own translation. Once installed, you can select your preferred language here. But as I mentioned earlier when we looked at the documentation, Moonshine offers two approaches to configuring the admin panel. The first approach, which we just explored, is the default method using arrays in Moonshine PHP, but you can also configure settings using an object-based approach through a provider, like this. Personally, I find this approach more convenient. You won't make mistakes about what to specify, plus you get autocomplete, which makes everything clearer and more structured. Let's see how to set this up. Go to the providers directory. Open Moonshine Service Provider PHP. This is a key file for customizing and configuring your admin panel. This is where you'll add new resources. If you generate them via the console using commands, they'll be registered here automatically. You'll also use this file to register new pages and adjust configurations as needed. Autocomplete will give you access to all available methods, changing the logo, modifying directories, and more. Speaking of directories, here's an interesting option. By default, Moonshine stores everything in the app Moonshine directory. But if you don't like that and want to use app admin, or even move everything outside app to src, for example, you can change the default directory via config-dir. Simply specify the new path relative to the base directory, say src admin, and don't forget to set the corresponding namespace. If you set app admin, the namespace will be generated automatically as app admin. However, if you place it under src, the namespace will be generated accordingly. In some cases, you may need to define it manually. Ultimately, all these configurations are flexible, and whether you choose the array-based approach or the object-based config is up to you. Now, let's move on to the next step, customizing the UI. We'll cover this in the next lesson. We'll continue working through the setup from top to bottom, fully customizing the admin panel and creating a new resource to understand how everything works. That's it for now. I'm really glad you're joining this journey into the world of Moonshine. I believe you'll be just as excited about this tool as I am. Beyond the code and documentation, Moonshine has a community, a space where you can always find support and answers to your questions. We continuously update the documentation and share best practices. In a way, Moonshine is like a family, and I invite you to be a part of it. Thank you for watching, and thank you for choosing, or considering, Moonshine. I'll make sure you understand everything along the way. That's all for today. See you in the next lesson on the Moonshine admin panel. Take care.